Steve's going to tell us about the state of the economy under President Trump. Give us a sense, because he says we are growing, we are strong, and better than ever
Steve,
before.
I remember him telling us that when he got elected, that Barack Obama didn't know how to run the government, didn't know how to run the economy, that he was going to give us 3% growth every year.
What do we got?
Actually, at times he said more than 3% growth. Before I plunge into this, let me just say, having been in the Obama White House, it bore no resemblance to the schedule of President Trump that we just described. President Obama was, in fact, in meetings at tight intervals all day, every day, working really hard. But okay, let's put that aside and talk about the economy. So the president did promise not just 3% growth, but there were times when he talked about 4%, 5%, and 6% growth. But we'll stick with 3% growth for the moment. And you can see, if I draw this line across here, roughly the 3% line, you can see there's only 2 quarters in which his growth has exceeded 3%. One that had just barely touched it. And if you look out just even to the last quarter, which hasn't been reported yet because of the government shutdown, you can see that, in fact, in the last quarter, growth will be well under 2% and declining from there, according to J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and everybody else who looks at this, except for the White House, which is still claiming 3% growth for 2019. But that is a mirage. Now, if you want to take a look at what the consequences of his policies have been that Sarah Huckabee Sanders just bragged about, just take a look at the budget deficit. So, as we all know, the budget deficit did hit a low point during the financial crisis, but it came back most of the way. And now you can see that because of the Trump tax cuts and because of the entitlements programs and all of our other obligations, deficits are going to hit $1 trillion next year. They're going to keep going under current policies and exceed $2 trillion by the end of the next decade.
All right,
we're talking about
let me stop here for a second. And if you could just explain, can we put this chart back up again? So, Steve, what you're telling me is, if viewers look at this chart, you got to put the chart
back up. They'll get back up.
All right, and Steve, so circle, if you will, again, the low point in the past during the government, during 2000.
Sorry,
all right,
it's hard to do it on this chart.
That's the low point. Yeah, that's the low point of the deficits. But you're saying that you see that rise going up, and that's during Barack Obama's presidency, that the deficits keep getting smaller. And so you're saying that plummeting line going down, those massive $1 trillion deficits, that's all happened while Donald Trump has been president.
That's on Trump's watch. Yes, Barack Obama brought the deficit down. It was starting to creep up just a little bit, as you can see, but really it exploded because of a combination of the tax cuts and the spending increases, which were bipartisan. The Democrats and the Republicans got together to do those spending increases. But the consequence of it is we've done nothing about the deficit problem, and we're now looking at these $2 trillion deficits as far as the eye can see. $12 trillion of additional debt over the next 10 years on top of the close to 20 that we have now.
Yeah, and John Heilman, it seems that Donald Trump, at least from what he said over the past week, doesn't actually even understand deficits in the national debt. He's talking about trade deficits and explaining why the national debt is at $22 trillion and why deficits have absolutely exploded under the Republican Party and absolutely exploded under Donald Trump's presidency.
It's absolutely shocking to me, Joe, that you would suggest that Donald Trump does not have a firm grasp on macroeconomic theory or on the data that informs it.
I know.
Yeah, I'm shocked about that. And I'll also say, to go back to an earlier part of the conversation, that because I didn't want to let it go, and because we bring a little thematic unity to this, I was looking at our friend Eddie Glaude here when you were talking about Donald Trump's constant references to how lazy Barack Obama is. And I wondered whether Eddie is familiar in any circumstances with and what the possible correlations are between white people referring to African Americans as kind of reflexively as thinking of them as lazy, whether that's a common trope or and indicative of anything that you've ever seen before.
Oh, it has a long history, John. Yeah, as you know. Yeah, absolutely.
See, and I don't put it past Trump.
So
manufacturing, Steve, take us through where we stand there.
So a couple other things. Manufacturing, remember Make America Great Again was the centerpiece of the campaign. It revolved a lot around manufacturing. And so here's the scorecard on manufacturing. As you can see, manufacturing's share of the total economy dropped sharply. It's gone all the way back to 2000. You had the financial crisis in here. But here's Trump, and essentially manufacturing share of the economy really hasn't done much of anything at all. He's added about 500,000 jobs in that area, but we lost 5.5 million, and so manufacturing is no bigger a part of our economy today than it was when Donald Trump arrived. And then we can talk lastly about the stock market, which he also loves to brag about. He bragged about it the other day.
He loves it.
And here's his scorecard on the stock market compared to his immediate predecessors. You can see that he has a very 19.2% increase in the stock market during his 2 years. That's a very good number, except that Obama and Bush 41 actually did considerably better. And obviously, Bush 43 had a rough ride, and even Bill Clinton had a somewhat rough ride. It's amusing that he actually tweeted 13 months ago, he tweeted that the Dow had passed 25,000. And then 13 months later, a couple weeks ago, he again tweeted that Dow had passed 25,000, meaning that in the past year, the Dow has essentially done nothing.
At least in that case, both were accurate, though.
They were both accurate. Yes, they were both accurate.
All right.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.